welcome back to The Composer's Life. I'm Nadia, your host, and this podcast is about all things music composition, composers, what life is like as a composer, and so much more. I haven't done an episode by myself in a very long time because I've been conducting interviews with people in the music industry, mainly film composers, and some of my professors from Berklee College of Music. So I haven't done a solo episode in I want to say a year or so, which is quite a long time. um, but I wanted to come and do an episode on a topic that's a little more fun in music to look into. Before I get into that, I want to give an update of what I've been up to in the music industry. I like to do this because it's helpful for me to talk to other people that aren't famous composers and get a feeling for what their work looks like and everything. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with this. I've worked on quite a few short films over the past year, and all of them have been very different genres, and they've all been student films, and they've all used and focused on young adults. But the storylines have been so quirky and different from each other. It's been a really fun experience because working with student filmmakers, they have a vision of what they want in their film, but not necessarily a specific music direction. They might have an idea of oh, they hear strings or an idea of genres they hear in their film, but it's kind of up to me to be able to do that and experiment with the music myself. So I've really enjoyed doing that. My favorite film to work on was called Holy Rollers, and it was set in the South in a church group. And the music was a mixture of classical, garage, rock band, and Southern Christian music. And that was so fun because different parts of the story called for different kinds of music. And it was fun to try and create a cohesive soundtrack for something like that used so many different kinds of music. I was also fortunate enough to release an EP last August called The Storm, and I'm hoping to do a future episode more in depth on the making of that. But I was able to collaborate with a really good friend who dances and also makes films. So she was able to make a music video for one of my pieces. And if you'd like to check it out, I'll put the link in the episode notes so you can click on that link. The last update I wanted to share is that I started a newsletter to go along with this podcast. And basically, it's an email that I send out every other week. The newsletter doesn't follow the podcast, so I'm not sending emails about the podcast episodes necessarily, but I am trying to send an email out that helps creativity, helps you think about things maybe differently, or just kind of helps as a musician to read. So if you'd like to receive an email in your inbox that I don't know about you, when I open my emails, it's like a mess of politics and bills and random notifications. But if you'd like to see something that's about composing and kind of a breath of fresh air in your inbox, make sure to sign up for the newsletter. With all of that, let's dive into today's episode, which is about weird rituals. To give you some background, I'm part of a small group of creative people who meet once a month. And in our last meeting, we talked about creating a mantra for our creative time. And if you don't know what a mantra is, I had to look it up just to make sure. But it's basically a repeated phrase or slogan. Let's look it up again. So, mantra definition. It it's something that was originally in Hinduism and Buddhism, and it's a word or a sound that you repeat to aid concentration and meditation. But another version is a statement or slogan repeated frequently. And the purpose of having a mantra for the creativity would be to kind of have something you repeat to yourself every time you're about to compose, for example, that would kind of get you into the mindset and switch you on for that creative time. That I thought was a really interesting thing to think about. And it got me thinking about rituals and mantras and things that people do in the music world. I've never heard of people necessarily saying a mantra, but there are things like pre performance rituals that people do. For example, I know in the opera world, I think people say like toi, toi, toi as a way of saying good luck for the performance, or even like break a leg in the musical world. And then there are other things people do before performances, like eat the same meal every time or before an audition. And I also found out that Keith Richards, who is a member of the Rolling Stones, eats a shepherd's pie before every performance and has to be the one to break the crust or he won't go on stage. So these are kind of interesting things that we do as humans because it also exists in sports. People, you've probably heard of people having like a lucky pair of socks that they wear for every game or different things like that. I thought it would be fun to look up specific rituals and things done by composers in the past. And I just kind of wanted to look into them to see if they existed. And also, if they did exist, what were they? And did they impact those composers' works? So, I have a list of composers that we're going to go through and talk about their weird rituals. I know that some of these things were probably due to mental illness or other causes like that, but I still think it's fun to see and look into a little bit of these people's lives other than just their music. So, the first person we're going to start with is Beethoven. The first ritual I found from Beethoven was that he counted 60 coffee beans every morning to make his coffee with. This, I think, is not based on any factual evidence we have. I found a reference to it in a Forbes article and a lot of coffee companies. But I think the story originates from Schindler, who wrote a book about Beethoven or something like that. So I don't think people actually give this as factual information about Beethoven. Nevertheless, I thought it was really interesting, an interesting concept that he would be so particular if he did do this about his coffee. Another thing Beethoven did was use cold water to wash his hands and splash his face with because he believed it helped stimulate his creativity and would wake him up. And apparently, not only would he use it on his hands and face, but he would pour entire pitchers of water over his head, which would damage his wooden floors and his landlord would get very upset by. This ritual reminded me a lot of cold plunges, which has become a really popular thing that people do today too. I think there's like a few benefits in the health world that people talk about, but it's kind of Beethoven's version of a cold plunge, and he's not doing it for muscle recovery or anything like that, but kind of like creativity recovery. And I thought that was such an interesting concept. And I do like the idea of when you're getting bored. I don't know if you get bored or you're getting writer's block to kind of shock yourself out of it. I thought that was a really interesting concept. Okay, so number two is Haydn. Haydn had a routine of waking up every morning at 6:30 and immediately shaving his face. And he did this, I think, his whole life, from what I could find. I might be wrong. I thought this was also very interesting because this is a very routine thing to do, and it probably means that he went to bed early every night. I mean, maybe not every night, but if you're waking up at 6:30 every morning, you're probably going to bed earlier. I thought that was interesting because I feel like a lot of creative people don't go to bed early and stay up into the night and work in the night. And I do like the idea. I don't know if you are into it as much, but if you go on YouTube, TikTok, social media, morning routines are a huge deal with influencers. And this is kind of like Haydn's version of a morning routine. So I thought that was very interesting, but it's much more simple than what you'd see on social media today. The third composer is Chopin. His ritual, I think, is a little less weird and kind of has more to do with music, and perhaps is part of the reason why his music is so emotional and moody. But he preferred to play piano in the dark, and he would ask the venues where he performed or the groups of people he performed for that the lights be dimmed. This is a ritual that he held on throughout his lifetime. And I also found out that people felt very connected to his music because he was openly emotional when he played piano and preferred very intimate settings for performing. I thought this was a very interesting ritual, and thinking about playing piano myself in these conditions, dimming the lights and having a more intimate setting, it feels like there's less pressure to be perfect, I think, because a lot of the time when you think of a music performance today, the musicians are on a stage lit up, so that's the only thing that you're looking at and concentrating on. But changing that around a bit and being in a more intimate setting and turning the lights down kind of puts less pressure on you as the performer. It kind of sets a different mood for the audience. I still find myself getting lost in the music in a good way when I'm watching a performance, but I think dimming the lights, even for the performer, there's probably less pressure for you to look a certain way while you're playing piano. And it allows you to kind of get lost in that music as well, instead of feeling the heat from the lights and the pressure of all the eyes watching you that you can't see. So I thought this was a really interesting one. Next, we have Eric Satie. Satie was very particular about quite a few things in his life. One of them is that he had multiple pairs of the same gray suit, and that's all he would wear. Another one is that he only liked eating white foods like eggs, sugar, shredded bones, fat, salt, etc. Those are interesting things to be very particular about. Maybe in some ways it helped with his creativity, because I think sometimes we look at creativity as having to be completely free and have no restriction in order to be like the most creative. But a lot of the time, creativity comes in structure and putting rules or boundaries on it, because then it forces you to create something within those bounds. So maybe that affected some of his music. Maybe he approached music in a similar way, and the way he did it. Who knows? Interesting thing to think about. Next is Stravinsky. Stravinsky held himself to a very strict daily routine. Within that routine, he would compose for a block of 4 hours, and he forced himself to do it even when he did not want to. Very good self discipline. Along with that composition block, he also performed headstands to overcome creative stagnation. I, again, love the idea of doing headstands, doing something kind of weird like Beethoven pouring water over his head, in order to kind of wake you up and get you in a different mindset. I like as well that it's a physical change to your environment. So it's not just like, okay, I'm just going to like go lay down or watch a YouTube video or, do something different, but it's changing a physical sensation. So it kind of shocks not just your thinking, but like your body system. And I feel like that would help a lot in taking a break, not just walking out, getting a snack and coming back, but actually changing something that you're feeling. I like that idea. And I'm sure that composing for 4 hours, it takes a lot of discipline. I think depending on, you know, what you do and how you compose, for me personally, if I'm working on a piece that I absolutely love and am very inspired in, time goes by really fast. But if I don't know what to work on and I'm not feeling particularly inspired one day, time moves so slowly. So I'm sure that just making yourself do something like that every day is probably really good for your mentality, for your creativity, and just making yourself create even when you're not necessarily inspired to. So I think that's probably a great habit to be in. The next composer we have is Tchaikovsky. He had to have a 2 hour afternoon walk every single day, and he counted it down to the minute. And he believed that if he finished his walk even a minute before 2 hours, he would have bad luck and something very bad would happen to him. And I also found out that he wouldn't write down his pieces until they were completed in his head. That to me sounds very obsessive and probably would make me go a little bit crazy sometimes because I don't know if I've ever completed a piece of music in my mind before writing it down. I'm not very good at seeing details in my mind. So even if I want to draw a picture or anything from memory, if I start to zoom in on the details in my mind, it becomes more blurry and I need to look at a picture to do it. And I feel like it's a little bit similar with music. I can hear a line of music, like a melody, but if I tried to zoom in on the harmonies going on or like the other instruments and what they're doing, I don't hear or see what they're doing. And that's why I go to the piano or wherever else. So I think that being able to do that for one is incredible. And if you can do that, that is incredible. What an incredible talent. I also think the 2 hour afternoon walk is probably really good. Probably something all composers need to do is get out and be outside and do something active because I think we tend to not be in that category of people. But feeling like you're going to have bad luck if you don't have it down to a specific time is probably something to do with mental illness in some way. So I think that's quite interesting to learn about him. Next is Shostakovich. Shostakovich had an obsession with his clocks and making sure every single clock in the house was exactly synchronized. I think also you have to remember that he didn't live in a time when digital and electronic clocks were around. They did come out during his lifetime, but not at the beginning. And I think this is really interesting. I would definitely understand wanting everything to be at the right time because, that was how you told time. It's not like us where we can just look at our phone screen and know what time it is all the time. I don't know if I would be someone that would be obsessed with everything being on time down to the second, but you know. Next, we have Schoenberg. He had an irrational fear of the number 13, which is known as, if I can even say this word, triskaidekaphobia. If I say that wrong, I'm sorry. This affected how he wrote his music. He wouldn't label measure 13 as 13, but instead as 12A, and he modified the title of an opera he wrote, which was called Moses and Aaron. Because it was 13 letters, he spelled Aaron wrong and omitted one of the A's to make sure that it wouldn't be 13 letters. I think if he was this particular about 13 in his music, we can only assume this affected probably like his rhythms, the kinds of notes he used, his phrases, everything he wrote, and probably everything in his life, which would be very stressful. But again, it's putting a boundary and a restriction on your creativity, which in a lot of ways enhances what you're doing, in my opinion, when you try exercises like that. But I think it would be extremely stressful to live with. Those are the rituals I found to be the most interesting. Who knows how these habits and things affected these composers' creativity? Obviously, some of them directly related to their composing, but some of them didn't. They just lived with these things. And it's nice to take a step back and see these composers as people. I do want to say something about this. I know that mental illness is a huge factor in music and musicians today and in the past. And sometimes I feel like when you learn about composers in the past that are like so incredible, it seems like if you don't deal with something, your music won't be as good or you won't be famous or whatever. And I think that's a really unhealthy way of viewing it. That's where my mind goes a lot of the time. But these are just people who were in circles of very famous royalty and famous circles. They're not the majority of composers who have ever lived. And just because we have their music doesn't mean they're fantastic and incredible pieces by other people. I do think there's something to be said for self-discipline that's been kind of lost in some ways today because we have instant gratification and we just have entertainment at our fingertips. I think that self discipline plays a huge role in success and in getting better at something. I think we as musicians know that. Probably if you've played an instrument, if you play an instrument and you're good at it, you know how many hours of practice and dedication it takes. So I think it's just really interesting to I think it's important to distinguish those things when looking at these rituals and composers. But I thought these rituals were very interesting. In fact, I thought they were so interesting, I decided to test some of them out. And I lived them for an entire week just to see what kind of effect it would have on my compositions and creativity. I documented how this went every day, and I've made a video, and I also wrote a newsletter about it. If you want to watch the YouTube video, I've linked it in the episode notes below. But check it out and see what you think. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on what rituals you'd be curious to try out and on what kinds of things you think would help your creativity. And if you have any other suggestions actually for challenges I should try as a composer. I'd love to hear that from you. So, if you'd be interested, check that link out below. That's it for today. Those are the rituals I found. If you're still listening and you like the show, please do subscribe and leave a rating so that other people can find the show as well. And if you like the show, highest rating would be amazing. And if you have any comments about it, that would also be amazing. Thank you again for listening, and I'm happy to be back doing some solo episodes. I have more interviews to come, but hopefully I can mix it up and do interviews and solo episodes as I keep going. Thank you for listening today, and I will talk to you next time on The Composer's Life.